In early colonial America, policing was done by volunteers of communities in shifts. They provided social services like lighting street lamps, running soup kitchens, and recovering lost children and animals. Very little of their time was spent controlling crime. There were police squads in the South that served as slave patrols, but it wasn't until 1838 that the U.S. created its first police department. A year prior, in 1837 Boston, an Irish funeral procession ended up blocking an American-born volunteer firefighting company returning from a fire. The clash turned into a race riot that involved as many as 15,000 people, or 20% of the city's population. The city's Broad Street Irish neighborhood was burned down, and the only people convicted were Irish Americans. The volunteer police did nothing to prevent the damage to private property. New immigrant groups were moving into the cities, labor conflict was developing, and gang activity was developing, pitting groups from different ethnicities and neighborhoods against each other. So you start seeing the formation of urban police departments. A year after the Broad Street riot, Boston created the nation's first full-time police department, followed by New York in 1845. Politicians hired police officers that would help them stay in power, and that meant police officers that would serve their wealthy campaign donors. Before the riot, business owners hired private guards to protect their goods while being transported. But with the creation of the police department, the financial burden of protecting capital shifted away from wealthy business owners to the working class through taxes. The role of police changed from providing community services to protecting private property. Coming out of the Industrial Revolution in 1840, there was a growing labor movement. In 1866, the National Labor Union was formed and convinced Congress to limit the federal workday to 8 hours. Inequality was increasing rapidly. The exploitation of workers through long hours, dangerous working conditions, and low pay was endemic, and the dominance of local governments by economic elites was creating political unrest. The only effective political strategy available to exploited workers was what economic elites referred to as rioting, which was actually a primitive form of what would become union strikes against employers. Union membership was rising, and these strikes, or riots, as politicians, police, and wealthy individuals called them, became extremely common in major cities of the North. The police were tasked with breaking them up. Effectively, capitalists got taxpayers to not only pay the bill of protecting their property, but also to break up protests against them. From 1880 to 1900, New York City experienced over 5,000 strikes involving almost 1 million workers. Chicago saw over 1,700 strikes involving over 500,000 workers in the same period. The use of public employees to serve private economic interests and to use legally ordained force against organizing workers was both cost-effective for manufacturing concerns and politically useful in that it confused the issue of workers' rights with the issue of crime. With very little oversight or accountability, police would break up these strikes in the same way they break up the riots of today, with extreme violence. The value of armed paramilitary presence authorized to use indeed deadly force served the interests of local economic elites who had wanted organized police departments in the first place. The presence of a paramilitary force occupying the streets was regarded as essential because such organizations intervened between the propertied elites and the propertyless masses, who were regarded as politically dangerous as a class. In order to take a more proactive solution to the growing labor movement, catch-all public order laws were created as a way to disperse workers in public spaces before they could strike or unionize. 80% of all arrests during this period were of workers for trivial public order crimes. In Chicago alone, between 1875 and 1900, nearly 1 million workers were arrested for such crimes. One such law that was common in cities was a Tramp Act, which effectively criminalized being in public without a job. So, people would lose their job for going on strike and then be arrested for vagrancy. Of course, this was only enforced on the low-income, dangerous classes, immigrants and non-white people. With the invention of the telephone in 1876 came the Karen. Locked police call boxes were placed in cities and wealthy businessmen were handed the keys, allowing good and respectable white citizens to have police act as their personal security against the dangerous working class and non-white citizens. So it is not by coincidence, but by design, that we see a militarization of the police in today's growing labor and civil rights movement. Shit don't change.